Thank you, Glenn. Yeah, it's 9 o'clock here. I got up about 5 thanks to my cats. And yeah, I always get up that early. But anyway, gee, I like that, the number meeting, because what I was talking about earlier was the popsicle meeting in India, which is exactly like the number meeting, except they pick up popsicle sticks that have topics on it. Anyway, my name is Cherie Johnson. I am an alcoholic, and I am happy and grateful to be here. Thank you so much for asking me. My sobriety date is June 6th, 1965, which means this last year, in June, I celebrated 56 years of sobriety, one day at a time. It is only one day at a time, and just for fun, I looked up the days today. And as of today, if I finish off this day, sober, I'll have 20,561 days. Now that to me is amazing, because when I first came into the program, I remember standing in front of the Long Beach Alana Club thinking, God, how am I ever going to stay sober for the rest of my life? I'm only 18 years old. And somebody said, well, you don't have to do it for the rest of your life. You only have to do it for today. And thank God for that. And I've been doing it for today, one day at a time, for that many days. A little bit about what I used to be like for some identity purposes. First of all, I never took a social drink. I don't even know what social drinking is all about. I didn't know how to have that, but I did know how to get drunk, because that was what I did. I never said, let's have a drink. I always said, let's go get drunk. And, that was what it was all about. And I did this for 5 years. That was my short little drinking career. I'm a high bottom drunk. That's what they call us in the big book, I guess. And I blacked out all the time, so I don't have a lot of memory of those 5 years when I was drinking, because, the whatever it was that I was doing during that time kind of fell into the, I guess you could call it the blackout hole, because it falls in and it never comes out again. I did have a couple of people tell me some of the stuff I did, but mostly I have no idea. It's too bad. My drunk log is fairly dull. Not much happened. I didn't go to jail. I didn't go to any institutions. I didn't get any drunk driving stuff. However, I did get pregnant. And who knows if that was directly from drinking, but I know I was drunk when it happened. And I gave the baby up for adoption. And the reason I'm bringing this up, because my daughter is in genealogy. She does that ancestry stuff, and she has managed to find the son that I gave up for adoption, who's now 57 years old. We may meet, I don't know. He lives back east, and more will be revealed, but you never know what's going to happen. You never know what's going to happen, so it's in God's hands. More will be revealed. So for most of my teen and adult life, I was looking for love in all the wrong places. I didn't know what love was all about. It was mostly, I love you, let's go to bed. Or maybe it was, let's go to bed, I love you. I'm not quite sure which came first. Years later, my daughter one time said, Mom, I think I'm in lust with this guy. And I thought, Jesus, I could have used that, when I was growing up, because mostly I was in lust with people, but I thought it was love, because I knew no difference. And it wasn't until, getting into the program for a few years that I actually learned how to love with my pants on. And today, life has changed. My picker was broken. I didn't know how to have relationships. I was in and out of more relationships than I can count. I have to tell you that. I can't remember all of them. And what was I going to say? And I came into the program and started putting the steps into living action, and things started to change. And I've actually had a couple of healthy relationships over the years. I was married for 25 years to someone in the program, and we finally split because we'd grown apart and had grown different ideas. And today I'm married to an absolutely awesome man who joined Al-Anon after he met me, and we support each other in everything we do. And I like to say that not only can we talk to each other, called communication, we actually can listen to each other, which is really different for me. Listening was not one of my best traits. And I don't have to assume that I know what he's thinking. I have it's between us that if we don't hear right, we ask. There's the assumptions, to make an ass out of you and me, it just doesn't work in my life anymore. So I no longer have to assume. I talk to him, and because he's a non-alcoholic, I get a kick out of him because he talks about, he goes to AA meetings with me generally, and so he's been to a lot of meetings over the years. But when he listens to people talk about that, that tipsy feeling that you get after you've drank a little bit, he usually stops when it gets a little tipsy. He doesn't want to go any further. He doesn't like feeling out of control. And yet that's kind of, what I drank for. So it's interesting because he did not understand addictions. But he's gotten better over the years. And just one short little story, when we first got together, I had asked him for when he was going to the store, I said, just get me a little chocolate cupcake. I just want one chocolate cupcake. That's all. And he came back with a box of chocolate cupcakes. And I said, but I only wanted one. And he said, but they're all individually wrapped. And I said, yeah, but you don't understand. I know they're there. And I can unwrap each one individually just as fast as I could any other thing. And so over the years, he's learned that if I just want one of whatever it is I want, that I get one, no matter if it costs more or not, because I have an addictive personality and I don't just stop at one. So yeah, I came into the program at 18 years old. My mom had joined AA a few years back. She divorced and I went with her. My sister went with my dad. And so during the time I was drinking, I got a lot of AA. I went to meetings with her. I actually made 12-step calls with her, the kind of 12-step calls that you do at 3 o'clock in the morning when somebody is drunk and you go talk to them. I've been in the car taking somebody to the hospital because back then we didn't have what you call, your recovery houses or the places where everybody goes. That is totally out of my head right now. We only had hospitals. And I remember we were in New Mexico at this time, in Grants, New Mexico, and we had to drive to Albuquerque, which was 70 miles away. And there was a guy in the car in the back seat. And he said he had a gun and he wanted to shoot himself. And my mother said, well, if that's what you want to do, fine. Otherwise, just sit there and we'll get to the hospital soon. And we got him to the hospital and obviously he didn't shoot himself. But, so I got to experience a lot of that before I even came into the program. So when I got here, I had a little bit of an inferior and superior feeling. I felt unlovable, unacceptable, unworthy. I felt just, alone. I was fearful. And on the other hand, I felt like I knew all about the program, so you can't tell me anything, which was not a great help in getting into the steps. But because I came in at 18 and because I was a high bottom drunk, I had a lot of people tell me I was too young to be an alcoholic, that they had drank more than I spilt or spilt more than I drank. Anyway, and I didn't identify with anybody. People didn't drink like I drank. Most of them were older, much older, and had been drinking for years. And somebody said, well, stop trying to identify with a drunkalog and listen to how people think and feel. Listen to how people feel. And when I got out of the drunkalogs and got into the feelings, I discovered that everybody felt afraid. Everybody, many, many people felt unworthy and unlovable. And I could identify with those feelings. And so it kept me coming around. But thanks to Tradition 3, and I'm always grateful for Bill and Bob for doing the traditions the way they did and throwing it out there, because Tradition 3 doesn't have a requirement. Actually it does. The only requirement is the desire to stop drinking. And I had that. But there's nothing that says I have to drink so long, I have to drink so much, I have to drink a certain kind of booze. I don't have to fill in any forms. All I have to do is have a desire. It doesn't say I have to be a certain age. I just have to have a desire to stop drinking. And I did that. And so, I came into the program in February of 65, admitting that I was an alcoholic because, of course, I'd had all that information and all that knowledge. Got immediately connected with somebody in the program, a man, of course, because, I fall in love. And he wasn't doing what I wanted him to do. So 4 months later, I decided to get drunk at him because I did that. I drank at people. I didn't get drunk, but I did have drinks. And that was the last time I drank. And what happened was in February, I admitted I was an alcoholic. And in June, I conceded to my innermost self that I was an alcoholic. I accepted in my innermost self. It went from my head down to my heart. And once I accepted that I was an alcoholic, I jumped in with both feet. And I, my home group, I got active in my home group. I got into service, washing ashtrays and coffee cups, because that's what we had back then. Everybody smoked, and, we all had real cups. And little by little, I did more and more as I stayed sober. I got to be secretary. And I remember the first time that I was, and I say this allowed to be secretary, I think I'd finally had maybe 3 or 4 months, but it was an honor. It was something that I was working towards, and back then the only thing the secretary did was read the announcements. They didn't run the meeting. There was a chairperson that ran the meetings, but just being able to be of service in that way. So, starting out with washing coffee cups and ashtrays was the first inkling I got of what it felt like to be of service and not to be so selfish. And then, of course, that changed. As I continued to stay sober, I got more active and learned more about getting out of self and thinking of others, because I was pretty much, all about me. God and I were not friends when I came to the program. The God I had came from my mother, who was in New Age, and my grandmother, who was a Southern Baptist, Pentecostal, whatever. And so there was a big mixture. And I really didn't know what I wanted to believe in, but I was told I could have my own God. And again, I am so grateful for Alcoholics Anonymous, for Bill and Bob and those that put this thing together, that there is nothing that you have to believe in. There's nothing that says, this is the God that you must have. These are the things that you must do. Well, there are things you must do, but, it has nothing to do with the God thing. But being able to find a God of my understanding. Somebody said, well, if you don't like the God you have, just create one. Find one you like. What would you like to have your God have? Do you want him to be lovable and acceptable and, forgiving? And, what are the attributes that you'd like to have for your God? So I kind of thought about that. And what actually happened was that I turned to the ocean, because I knew the ocean was a power greater than myself. And I couldn't control it. And when I sat in front of it, I felt peaceful. I could feel calm. And when I was angry and stuff, I could yell at it and I would feel better. And so I turned to the ocean. And so the ocean kind of became the God of my understanding. And I'll get into a little more about that in a minute. My husband, on the other hand, he's a recovering Catholic, as he calls himself. And he had to do something because, he had a lot of guilt and shame where God was concerned. And so what he's done is he's done an acronym for God of my understanding. Some people do GOD, good orderly direction for God. He does GOMU, GOMU, God of my understanding. And we even have it on our license plate, GOMU for us. It does create opportunities for speaking to people when they ask us what it means. It kind of opens the door a little bit. But, today the Daily Reflections was talking about the limitless load, and that for me is what AA has been. It's a limitless load of stuff. There's so much that has happened to me, so much that I've learned, far more than I could ever have dreamed of. If somebody had said when I first came in the door, what would you like to see your life be like? I had absolutely no idea. And the things that have happened to me, the things that I've done, the honesty, my God, the honesty that has come out. I didn't know how to do anything where people were concerned. I was afraid of people. I couldn't love, I didn't know the first thing about love. And I remember I kept journals. One of the things that I did do was keep journals because my first sponsor told me writing was important. And I've read back in some of these journals, and in all of them, I was asking God to please help me to learn about love without a price tag. Teach me to love without a price tag. And it was over and over again. And I got to say today, I'm probably as close to that as I could possibly be. I've experienced the promise of step two. Step two is a promise, in case you don't know that. It says came to believe. It doesn't say we might believe. It says we come to believe that a power greater than ourselves could restore us to sanity. And that sanity that it's talking about, that I finally learned what it was, because when I first got sober, I was so confused. How could I be crazy? And what does this mean? And, I questioned all the steps. They were just all, they were all crazy in my head. But in the 10th step, it says by now sanity will have returned or been restored or something like that. And it occurred to me not long ago that this is the answer to step two. That's where the sanity that step two talks about gets restored. And what is the sanity? For me, it's meaning that today, when life sucks, I don't think about drinking. Today, when life sucks, I think about picking up the phone and talking to somebody. Or I pick up a piece of paper or my computer or whatever, and I write about what's going on inside of me. I don't immediately go, screw this, I'm getting drunk, which is basically what I did when I first came in. I can do things today. Like I can go places where alcohol is served, and I can be around it. I am sane where that is concerned. I no longer want to drink. I no longer need to drink, thanks to this program. And because of this program, I've found this God. And step three for me was so difficult because it talked about turning my will and my life over to the care of this God that I was, trying to get to know. And I could not understand what will and life was all about. To me, they were like nebulous words. They were just way out there. And finally, somebody said, well, try changing the words to thinking and actions. Turn your thinking and your actions over to the God of your understanding. And all of a sudden the light went on and I went, oh, I can do that. I get that. Step three is a decision step. There's really no action. And the way it was explained to me was like, and I'm sure you guys have heard it, but I'm going to tell you anyway. There's three frogs sitting on a lily pad, and one decides to jump in. How many are left? And a lot of people go, well, 2. However, there's 3 because one only decided to jump in. He didn't jump in, and that's kind of what step 3 is talking about. I have to make a decision to turn my thinking and my actions over. And what's the action for that? Well, it's to go into step 4. It tells us at once, we do stuff. And step 4, I know sounded so complicated to me because it talked about morals and stuff, and I couldn't, it's kind of like I couldn't see the forest for the trees. My mind complicated the whole thing. Plus, Joe and Charlie, which is a meeting I run, and I love Joe and Charlie. I've been listening to them since I was 20 years sober. But, they explain those columns that the Big Book talks about. But when I got sober and I read the Big Book, that part of it, I didn't get the columns. I didn't understand it. It was too difficult for this mind to get. So basically, I wrote out my life story, and of course that helped, obviously, because I stayed sober. But the simplicity of step 4, all it really means is that it gives me a pathway to look at my past life, to see, how I've lived it, and see clearly how I've hurt others. And of course, I always think others have hurt me, so, they're in my 4th step. And it allows me to see my character defects. And it's really not that difficult. But what happens is when I do the step 5, when I finally go to my sponsor or whoever it is that I'm going to share this with, and I read this to them, the thinking, like those places where I thought I was hurt, she gets to point out to me how she gives me a clear, a new pair of glasses. She gives me a clear understanding and a vision of what really happened. And, and I get to see what my part is. Even today, one of the things that my first sponsor, and I think I said it, she taught me to write. And so when things go haywire in my life today, I always sit down and write about it. And I always share it with somebody. I have a gal. We kind of sponsor each other. We talk to each other. She's been sober a long time, and obviously so have I. But I still need somebody to pass things on to. I need feedback. Listening to my own self and my own thinking is so dangerous because I can rationalize things so easily, But when I share it with another human being, they get to say, hey, look, this is what's really going on. They give me the reality and not the fantasy. I have a wonderful fantasy in my head about all kinds of things, but they give me a different perspective. And, I can get stuck in my own mind and believe my own thinking. And that just doesn't work. Not if I want to continue to recover in this program. It's very dangerous. When I looked at step 6, I loved in the big book because it's just a sentence, it's very short. And basically what step 6 does is it just asks me to be willing to give this God that I'm trying to get to know, to remove the character defects that, I found in my 4th step. And that's basically all. I mean, there's not much else you have to do with step 6. And when I get to step 7, I have to ask this God to remove these things, but at his time and place, it's, and it's not, it says, humbly asked him to remove our shortcomings. Humbly for me means that, all right, I've hit my head against the wall trying to do this myself. Now I give up. All right, God, it's in your hands. That's usually how it works for me. But I have to let God do it in his way. And like I said, sometimes that doesn't come until I've tried doing things myself. And then I give up. A lot of the times what I have to do with my defects of character is, and when I find myself falling back into my old habit patterns, is to do the opposite, to take the opposite direction. And little by little, things change. Like, I'm very aware of my words. What I put out there comes back to me tenfold. And one of the things I've tried to do in the program, let's forget the try. I don't try anymore. One of the things that I've done in the program is when I hear myself say negative things to replace the words. And the simple example is we're so used to hearing, well, I don't know about you guys, but I'm so used to hearing, look what the devil drug in. And I don't know where that came from, but people say it all the time. And so now when I hear that, I say, well, look who the angel drug in. I have to be aware of what I'm saying so that I can change it. And that's kind of how things have worked in my life with the program and with the steps. And one of the things in step 8, what they told me to do was to make columns. The ones I want to make amends to, and the ones I don't want to make amends to, and the ones I'm never going to make amends to. And little by, and just start with one column at a time, and they kind of all move over. And that's kind of how it's worked for me. It's just one day at a time. And God, step 9, COVID has given me the opportunity to go to so many meetings in so many places around the world and listen to people. And over this time, I think, every once in a while I sit back and I think, well, you've made all your amends. You don't have anybody left. I've made amends to my family and, all this stuff. So then I'm listening to somebody talk on step 9, and they were talking about their father. And I realized that when I was 16 years old, when I was that pregnant girl, there was stuff I did where my dad was concerned, and I never made amends to him, ever. And he's been dead since 2013. And when I realized that, he's buried, 8 hours away from me in Riverside, California. I drove down to his grave, and he and I had a little talk. So I was able to make amends to him. And then as, I think, okay, I'm done. That's probably the last amends that I'll have to make. And I continue going to meetings because that's what I have to do if I want to stay sober. And I hear somebody else talk and I realize I still owe my sister some amends. And of course, she's still alive. So I was able to make amends to her. And then just a couple of weeks ago, somebody mentioned something else in a meeting. And I realized that there was some past stuff that had to do with my daughter. And I needed to make amends to her. And so I was able to do that. So what I've learned from this, especially in COVID, what I've learned from this is that I need to keep showing up in meetings. I need to keep my mind open. I used to think it was the how of the program, honesty, open-mindedness, willingness, but it's really the who of the program. Willingness, honesty, open-mindedness. I have to be willing and I have to be honest and I have to be open-minded. And I have to keep that going. It says these are essentials. These are indispensable, which means that I have no choice. And in doing that, I continue to learn things and things continue to be revealed to me. Now, I'm no longer saying, okay, I'm done. I don't owe anybody any more amends because I don't know what's going to happen. I'm going to listen to somebody else and who knows, maybe somebody way in my past that I've never even thought of will be brought up. So this is an ongoing program. This is not something that I do once and stop, and I'm so grateful for that, because I continue to learn. I get to learn every single day. For me, Alcoholics Anonymous and sobriety is not boring. Boring is when all I do is think about myself, and I've not really had a lot of time to be doing that, especially in COVID, because I've been kept very, very busy in AA meetings all over the world. Step 10 is one of my favorite steps. It's my go-to step. It's been very instrumental in my life in changing how I think about people, places, and things, and what has become important to me. That little axiom in there, I didn't get the axiom. I didn't understand it until I was about 10 years sober. Whenever we're disturbed, no matter what the cause, and the book says there's something wrong with me, I've changed that because I don't think there's anything wrong with me anymore. But what I do say is I need to look at me. So whenever I'm disturbed, no matter what the cause, I need to look at me, because the feelings that I feel when people come at me or say things or whatever they're doing to me, the feelings come from inside of me. They don't create those feelings. It's not their fault that I'm reacting to them. It's my deal. And I had a sponsor that was so wonderful for me. I had him for 8 years. And he gave me a tool that I still use today. And when I get upset, I have to ask myself, what am I doing with me right now to make me feel this way? I have to look at the buttons that people push. They're my buttons. And the thing I've learned through this program and through step 10 is that when my button gets pushed and I react, there's something that I need to look at. There's something in my past that I haven't dealt with that I need to forgive, that I haven't, I think I've done all this stuff and then I react to somebody. And I have to ask myself, do they remind me of somebody? Is their tone something that's familiar? Where did I first feel this way? When did this first happen? And I write about it and I go back to where it started. And then I work on forgiveness because I hate bringing my past into my present. It mucks it up, but it is. I am responsible for what I think, what I say, what I feel, what I do. I can blame it on you and I can play the victim card, but that doesn't work because that's not going to fix anything. Step 10 for me has taken the victim out of things. I am no longer a victim. I have to take responsibility for myself, for my actions, for my thinking, for my feelings. Step 11 for me is something that I still do today. I have to have a conscious contact with this God that I've come to understand. And basically step 11 is just taking time to get to know this power greater than myself by spending some time in quiet with him. And I can do this if I go for a walk. I can go by the ocean. I can go in the forest, or I can just sit still. there's no ritual that I have to follow. And I've tried all of it. I mean, I've read books on how do you meditate, and in the 12 and 12 in step 11, it has great instruction. And I used it when I first got sober, and it worked really well. And I still, it talks about, going to a place in your head, basically, that's calming for you. And for me, of course, it's the ocean. And so I have this picture of this beautiful cove with white sand and green stuff and a blue ocean. And I can go there in my head at any time and find the calmness and the peace of mind. But step 11 is, can be done while I'm walking. I don't have to be sitting still. It's very, very simple. And the more that I spend time with God, the less self-centered I get, which is, really one of those things. I had the God that I came in with, I didn't like very well. And because, as I said, I tried to create my own God. And what happened over the years, it didn't, I used the ocean, but what has happened over the years, somewhere in my 30s or 40 years of sobriety, I came across this realization that, that God and I are one. But there's a couple of people on here that have heard this before, but this is how I see God today. This is the God of my understanding today. And it has the ocean, and so I'm in Virginia Beach, and I'm standing at the boardwalk, and I'm watching the waves come and, ebb and flow. And I realize that as they're flowing into the shore, sometimes some of them are just gently lapping the floor, and some of them are like crashing. And yet they're connected to each other. They're not disconnected, and they roll back into the ocean. And as I'm watching them, I realize that every element of the ocean is in the wave, and that the wave actually is the ocean expressing as the wave. It's a unique expression of what the ocean is. And I realized that's how I see God, that God is my ocean and I am the wave. And every day I roll out. Sometimes it's not so nice, and sometimes it's very gently, but I'm always connected to that God. Like the wave is always connected to the ocean. And every element of God is in me as the ocean is in the wave. So I am God. I am an individual expression of God, expressing as myself. I am connected to God as the wave is connected to the ocean. And in seeing that, that I cannot get disconnected any more than the wave can get disconnected from the ocean. If I feel a disconnection, it's something I'm doing. I'm the one, I hear it all the time. Well, I moved. God doesn't move. I moved. And today, there's places in the big book that promises, there's so many promises in the big book, but today I don't need to move generally. God is my employer. God is my source and supply of all things. I have learned this through the years through putting the steps into living action. I still do step 11. I still write in a journal. I still read spiritual books. I call them my spiritual teachers, people like Emmett Fox and Eric Butterworth and Cahill Gibran and stuff like that. These people speak to me. That's the truth for me. It may not be the truth for you, but that's what speaks to my heart. And so that's what I read. And through doing all of this, it allows me, what's happened is step 12 is another promise, whether, you realize it or not, but it promises that we're going to awaken to the spirit. And for me, I awaken to the spirit of love through doing all of these steps. And I get to carry this love with me, and I get to carry it to people and sponsoring and going to meetings and, and how do I work with others? Sometimes what I have to do is I sit in a meeting. That's my love and service. Sometimes it's chairing a meeting. Sometimes it's being secretary of a meeting. I have to continue to be of service. There is no time, no matter how long I've been sober, there is no time that I get to sit back and say, I'm done. I don't get to do this anymore. I don't have to do this anymore. I don't need to go to meetings. I don't need to read the big book. I don't need to, to put the steps into action. I don't need to talk to anybody. I can just go live my life. It doesn't work that way for me. I have to continue to be active in Alcoholics Anonymous. And the thing that I've learned over the years is, there's two things for AA. There's the fellowship and there's the program. The fellowship is the meetings. And sorry, people, meeting makers don't make it. Just going to a meeting does not make you sober any more than sitting in a garage will make you a car. However, I need the meetings because I need the connection to the people. And through the connection to the people in the meetings, I get to learn more about putting the program, which are the 12 steps in the big book, into action. I need it all. I guess I could stay sober without the fellowship, but I prefer not to. I like feedback. I like people in my life to talk to me. I can read the book all I want, but there's sometimes, as I said, my mind can be a very dangerous place and I need the feedback. So I need people in my life. I need both the fellowship and the program, but I cannot sit back and say it's over. I've done enough. I've been sober 56 years. I don't need to do any more. That's just not it. I have to keep to be of service. I heard somebody when I was 9 years sober in Auckland, New Zealand, he had 30 years. And every time he spoke, he said, there's no recovery without change. And I've never forgotten that. I've never forgotten that because there is no recovery without change. We have to change. I had to change totally. I had to turn around 180 degrees and then 180 degrees. And then, it talks about having that rearrangement of thinking and stuff, that psychic change is what's needed to stay sober. And those 12 steps is what gives it to me. And the people in the program help me understand it. It's a we program. I cannot do this by myself. And that the psychic change happens and I get that spiritual awakening. And I have to keep giving it away. I have to continue to be of service. It's vitally important for me as an alcoholic and for me as someone with 56 years of sobriety to keep my foot in the door of Alcoholics Anonymous. I jumped in, I put both feet in. I really have no desire to take anything out, Today, because of the program, if my mind wants to think about a drink, the obsession, because that's all the obsession is a thinking deal. Nothing changes. I can't get drunk unless I take that first drink. And if I just think about it, I don't have to take that first drink. I have options. I have options. If I give myself 5 minutes, I can think about a drink for 5 minutes, and then I have to think about something else. As long as this is my experience, not necessarily the truth for everybody else, but it's my experience that if I don't take that first drink, as long as I don't take that first drink, I have a choice. But once I take that first drink, all choice is gone because the alcohol enters the body and the allergy is triggered and all it says is more. It wants more. The more I drink, the more I drink. What can I say? So I have to stay close. Sobriety has been a priority in my life from the day I walked in the door. It's still a priority in my life. It's not like I push everything out except, going to a meeting. But when my head is really on screwy, I have to take my mind to a meeting. I can't just sit there. I have to keep sobriety as a priority today. And there is no recovery without change. But for me, there's no continued recovery without continued change. And the only way I can continue to change is to keep showing up at meetings, to keep putting my butt in a chair and listen. I still remember my last drink. I remember my last drunk. I don't ever want to forget it. And one of the other things that when I first came in, I kept hearing, what's this spiritual part of the program all about? And I've learned that there is no spiritual part. The entire program is spiritual. The 12 steps are spiritual principles that, according to the big book, we lay at somebody's feet, which means that we go and ask people if they need a sponsor. We don't sit back and wait for them to come and ask us. Although, that's seems to be what we do. But the big book says, and if you look at Bill and Bob, they didn't wait for people. I mean, we wouldn't be here if they'd waited for people to come and ask them how they stayed sober. They went out and found people that were drinking and said, hey, do you want to stay sober? Do you want what I have? So there's a lot of things that go on, and that's some of the things that quickly, there are so many promises in the book. We always read, or at least I hear them always read, the ninth step promises, and they're read as the promises. Well, who will read the promises? But nobody says, or not often do they say, who will read the ninth step promises? So like when I first came in, I thought they were the only promises in the book because that's the way they talked about it. And then I discovered that they were only the ninth, that they're the promises that come after working the first 9 steps. And then in step 10, in the big book on page 84 and 85, I believe it is, there's 14 promises for step 10. And nobody ever talks about that. That's where it says that sanity gets restored. That's where it says that I don't have to be cocky or afraid of drinking. That's where it says that I can go places that I never wanted to, that I was afraid to go to before. It's important for newcomers to know that there's more than just the 9th step promises. And there's promises after step 3, and there's promises in step 5. There's promises all over the place. For those of you that are new, stick as close to the program as possible. And I know there's a couple that are kind of young on the young thing. And believe me, just because you're younger in age does not mean that this program can't work for you. It worked for me, but I had to do it one day at a time. And I had to have that inner knowledge that I was an alcoholic. I had no question when I finally conceded to my innermost self that I was an alcoholic. That is, for me, what happened was it opened the door for me to know that drinking wasn't an option when life sucked. I would get in my car and I'd haul ass down the street and I would do what my sponsor told me to do, which was walk through my drunk. And when I get to the end of, why I wanted to get drunk, and I would look back at it, the only thing that I solved by doing that was being drunk. The problem or whatever it was that I was drinking over was still there. And I was still going to have to go back and deal with it. But now I was going to have to, deal with getting sober again. And I tell you, it's easier to stay sober than it is to get sober. Today, I'm addicted to sobriety. I came in addicted to alcohol. But I love sobriety and I'm addicted to sobriety and I'm going to do whatever I need to do to continue to be sober. At 56 years, I still have quiet time with God. I still work with others. I've gathered sponsees over COVID. Carol is one that I met and she lives in Florida and I'm in California. But with Zoom and phones, you can sponsor. You don't have to have people right in front of you. There is no excuse for not being of service in this program. There's no excuse for sitting around and going, oh, well, it's Zoom, it's COVID, I can't do anything. I have a position in my home group, it's just service is what makes me happy today. And being able to share with you guys and go to different places and meet different people. I have so many people in my life today that were never there before because of Zoom and because of Alcoholics Anonymous. No matter what happens in my life, I don't ever have to be alone. If my husband dies, I don't have to be alone. I have people I can turn to. I've been divorced, I've lost animals, my mother, my dad. I never had to be alone unless I wanted to. I am so grateful for Alcoholics Anonymous. And, life is such a joy today. And for you guys that are new, please stick around. There is such an adventure ahead. There is so much wonderful things. Yeah, there's you got your hard knocks and all that kind of stuff, but you don't have to do it alone. You never have to be alone again. And you never have to take another drink as long as you live. If you just stay close to the program, stay inside, stick with the winners. I heard somebody say, I stick with the first 100, not the last 100. The first 100 are the ones that wrote the book. I stick with them. I don't stick with everybody's opinion. And it works one day at a time. And I just hope you keep coming back, all of you. Thank you very much.